Friends, it's now 10:01, so may I ask you to be seated? I would like to welcome you all to Johnsonburg, to this September meeting. We couldn't have a better day for it, so I'm very grateful for that. So welcome to the September 24 meeting of the Presbytery of the Highlands, whether you're with us online or here in Johnsonburg. I call the meeting to order and ask that you join me in a moment of prayer. Holy God, by your grace we gather in worship, celebration, and prayer, aware of the work to which you call us and grateful for the presence of your Spirit, which guides and directs us as we draw closer to you. Open our hearts and minds to your holy purposes, that they may be worked out in our midst. For this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. As we start our meeting, if you're on Zoom, you may want to have bread and wine or juice available at home for the celebration of the Lord's Supper. For those of you here in Johnsonburg, just be aware that our on-site communion elements are gluten-free.
When's it going to be communion?
Just a couple of really of housekeeping items before we start the meeting proper. Our esteemed presbytery leader was planning to be here in person. Unfortunately, she's not well. She has some issues with vertigo. So we decided that it wasn't a smart idea for her to be standing at the podium for a long time. So she will be with us, but presenting, making her presentations from Zoom. So we wish Jean a speedy recovery. The Zoom process, as a request for those of you here at Camp Johnsonburg, please would you turn off your Wi-Fi to make sure that we have the bandwidth to reach the people who are joining us on Zoom. And as this is a hybrid meeting, we'll use the following process. It's the same as the one we used at the meeting in May. For a question or point of order, those in person should raise their hand, and those on Zoom should use the raise hand feature. To raise your Zoom hand, depending on your device, look for the reactions button or more with 3 dots and select raise hand. If there's debate, we will make every effort to balance those speaking for or against the motion and those who are in person or remote. This sometimes entails a bit of juggling, so thank you for your understanding. In-person voting will be done by raising hands rather than shouting out your vote. If you're voting via Zoom on items of business, again, go to the reactions button or more with 3 dots, and then select the green check to vote in favor or the red X to vote against. The chat feature is also found in the panel. The primary use of chat is for sharing information, welcoming or greeting one another, which I think you've already started to do. However, in the interest of fairness and open discussion, it'll be turned off during debate and voting on motions. Please remember that all chat messages get saved at the end of the meeting. You can find all of this information in our Commissioner Handbook, which is available on the Presbytery meeting page of the website. And finally, if you're on Zoom, please remember to stay muted unless you're making a point of order or unable to get the moderator's attention. Okay. So there's one other sort of housekeeping item. The order of business for each of our presbytery meetings is crafted well in advance to provide time for matters of the presbytery to be addressed efficiently. We rely on Robert's Rules of Order as the impartial means to move through our work fairly and respectfully. My task as moderator is to ensure that this happens. At our last presbytery meeting, a sequence of events took place that left some members of the Assembly with questions that I'd like to now address on behalf of the Presbytery. And these notes are also in your meeting materials. One of the rights outlined in the parliamentary procedure is the right to speak. According to Robert's rules, a person can only speak once they've been recognized by the moderator, and no one can speak longer than permitted by the rules of the body. The Highlands Presbytery has traditionally given a speaker 2 minutes in keeping with the manual of the General Assembly. Should a person wish to exceed that amount of time, the chair or any member can ask to do so either by unanimous consent or by a motion to extend the limits of debate, which requires a 2/3 vote without debate. When a member's time is exhausted, it is the moderator's duty to call the speaker's attention to that fact by signal or interruption. Debate must be confined to the merits of the pending question. Speakers must address their remarks to the chair, maintain a courteous tone, and, especially in reference to any divergence of opinion, avoid injecting a personal note into debate. To this end, they must never attack or make any allusion to the motives of members. And that's a direct quote from Robert's Rules 4.30. Members bring business before the Assembly in the form of a motion. A motion is a member's formal proposal that the Assembly take a certain action. There are numerous categories of motion which you can find in the Roberts rules, or you can also get a handy dandy sort of summary on Amazon, which I was happy to find. After a report is made by a standing committee, by a member of the Presbytery staff, or by a member of the Assembly, it's appropriate for members to ask questions. The committee report is at that time the pending business, so a request for information is appropriate. Unless the person presenting the report makes a motion for action or presents a resolution, or a member of the Assembly makes a motion related to the report, the presentation of the report means that it is received by the Assembly and no further action is appropriate. In short, the only permissible response to a report is to ask for information or to make a motion. I hope that clarifies last month's May's situation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the Presbytery office to discuss them. So now, Mr. Stated Clerk, do we have a quorum present?
Yes,
Good. I'd now like to welcome any new ruling elder commissioners who may be joining us this evening. For those in the room, please stand and introduce yourselves, giving your name and church affiliation. If you could actually move to the mic in the middle there to do that, that would be very helpful so everybody, including on Zoom, can hear you. If you're with us online, please would you unmute, then introduce yourself, giving your name and church affiliation. Please would you also enter your information into the chat. Maybe we could start with those of you who are on Zoom to give people in the room a time to move to the mic. Are there any new ruling elder commissioners on Zoom? Yes, Tim.
I would like to introduce ruling elder commissioner, our clerk of session from Union Hill Presbyterian Church of Denville, John Ware, who is with us virtually as well.
Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else online? Okay, let's move into the room.
Well, I'd like to introduce Mildred Patterson from Somerset Presbyterian Church, ruling elder, who's online as well.
Welcome, Mildred. Any others online? Let's move into the room then.
With me, I have Bill Thompson. He is a ruling elder from Flemington Presbyterian Church.
Welcome, Bill.
Alejandra Ryder from Basking Ridge Presbyterian.
Welcome.
Kathy Ritchie, First Presbyterian Church of Succotash.
Welcome, Kathy.
Good morning, Lucy Deutsch, Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township.
Morning. Welcome, Lucy.
Carl Woodward, Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township.
Welcome, Carl.
Hello, my name is Pastor Eric Lai. I'm going to be served here for our church.
Welcome. Anybody else? So now I call on the stated clerk to explain unanimous consent.
Madam Moderator, the Assembly will be asked if they have any objections to the item that's been presented. If no one objects, then you will announce that the action has been decided. But if there is an objection because of opposition to the matter or a feeling that a vote on this matter is important, the member of the presbytery or the commissioner is invited to indicate their opposition by unmuting and saying, "I object," or by using a Zoom reaction such as raising their hand.
Thank you. You see the items for unanimous consent before you. Moving to the first item, Mr. Stated Clerk, do we have any corresponding members or guests present?
Madam Moderator, we do. We have Catherine Morgan, a member of the Community Church of Ringwood and a member of the Presbytery's Young Leader Formation Team. Ruling Elder Lisette Gonzalez Sosa, Director of Christian Education at the Presbyterian Church at Boundbrook, a member of Iglesia Hispana Presbyteriana Bethel in Vineland, New Jersey, a candidate ready to receive a call under the care of the Presbytery for Southern New Jersey, and a leader of the Martinsville Adaptive Reuse Project, which is a new church development hosted by the Presbyterian Church at Boundbrook. Third, we have Esther Chang, a leader of the Martinsville Adaptive Reuse Project. And finally, we have the Reverend Dr. John Wilkinson, a member of Philadelphia Presbytery and the director of the Ministry Engagement and Support Unit of the Presbyterian Church USA.
Thank you. Mr. Stated Clerk, would you like to make a motion to seat these persons?
I move that we do so.
Is there a second? Are there any objections? These people have been seated.
Madam Moderator, if I might have your permission, I would ask for a moment for the Reverend Dr. John Wilkinson for him to bring greetings from the General Assembly.
Please, Dr. Wilkinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Siblings and friends. I was thinking this morning, the only thing better than going to one's own Presbytery meeting on a Tuesday morning is visiting at another Presbytery meeting. So thank you. Thank you for your hospitality and your greetings and your ministry and this spectacular location. So the Lord be with you.
So if you,
My work with the Ministry Engagement and Support Team is focused around funds development and mission interpretation and supporting congregations and presbyteries. So it really is a great honor and pleasure to be here with you all. I'm also privileged in this season to be working with the denomination's funding model development team. So I get to work with your executive presbyter, my colleague and friend Jean, and we all wish her well. And I'm glad she's on Zoom anyway. So Jean, hope to see you soon and keep getting better. As I said, I work with funds development and mission interpretation. So before you grab your wallet or lock down your Venmo account, please know I'm mostly here today to say thank you and to connect with you a little bit, both during this meeting and during lunch and afterwards. You also have an MEA, a ministry engagement advisor. Her name is Lynn Foreman, And if you want to learn more about us, I think if some of you have the planning calendar, we're in there somewhere and you can see our pictures and our contact information. I want to say thank you, first of all, for all the ways you support the mission and ministry of the Presbyterian Church through special offerings, through the Presbyterian Giving Catalog, through supporting our mission coworkers across the globe, supporting Presbyterian disaster assistance whenever those opportunities come. Many of you are Matthew 25 congregations, another commitment that we make together. Every congregation is special, but I do want to give a special shout out to the Hilldale Park Church in Cedar Knolls and their pastor Ross Lang for their incredibly generous and almost out of proportion commitment to 1 great hour of sharing over the past few years. And you all know that story, but we're inspired by it. And we say thank you to that congregation and all of you who support our special offerings, the giving catalog, the many ways that your dollars can connect beyond this place to support people in need and people seeking new opportunities throughout our mission and ministry in the denomination. So thank you again for your welcome. I'm going to be meeting with the team after this meeting as you think about your funding future, and I'll look forward to those connections, but also be here for lunch if you want to say hello and make a connection, and then we can connect further after that. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
So moving along to the agenda. You have the agenda before you. It comes from the administration and coordinating team and needs no second. If there is no objection, I place the adoption of the meeting agenda before you. Are there any objections to that? The meeting agenda is adopted. You have the consent agenda before you. It comes also from the ACT and needs no second. If there's no objection, I place the adoption of the consent agenda before you. Are there any objections? The consent agenda is adopted. I now call on the stated clerk to present his report.
Madam Moderator, a written report has been submitted and is available to the Assembly. I would draw the Presbytery's attention to the webpage for this meeting, where recent information on the most recent General Assembly can be found. There are also 3 separate items from the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission. These are available to the Presbytery regarding the Presbytery of the Highlands of New Jersey versus the Reverend Ryan Ermer. In addition to those written documents, I am obliged to provide a summary at this time. Sorry about that. On June 14th, 2024, a preliminary order of the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission was received by the stated clerk's office. We learned that the moderator and clerk reviewed the Presbytery's appeal under the provisions of D60601, examination of notice of appeal. Upon receiving the notice of appeal, the Office of the Permanent Judicial Commission of the council that will hear the appeal shall promptly examine the notice of appeal to determine whether 1, the council has jurisdiction, 2, the appellant has standing to file the appeal, 3, the appeal was timely and properly filed, and 4, the appeal states and describes 1 or more of the grounds for appeal listed in D60201D. Following their review, the officers found that the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission has jurisdiction, the appellant has standing to file, the appeal is timely and properly filed, and the appeal states 1 or more of the grounds for appeal. That is to say, the Presbytery's appeal was accepted, and a hearing will be set for a time and place to be determined. And I will have more information on that in a moment. On June 20th, preliminary order number 2 of the General Assembly Permanent Judicial Commission was received. After the GAPJC received and accepted the Presbytery's appeal, a second notice of appeal, known as a cross appeal, was filed by Reverend Ermer. Reviewing those same 5 questions, the General Assembly PJC determined that the cross appeal filed by Reverend Ermer was not timely and properly filed. Remedial appeals have to be filed within 45 days after a copy of the final order was received by the appealing party. The Synod PJC decision was issued April 26th, and June 11th is 46 days later, 1 day later than the filing deadline. Therefore, because one of the questions in D60601 has been answered in the negative regarding timeliness, this cross appeal is dismissed. On June 24th, a stay of enforcement was certified by the GAPJC. And what they wrote was this: having jurisdiction to hear the appeal of the decision of the Permanent Judicial Commission of the Synod of the Northeast on April 26, 24, having received a request for a stay and a notice of appeal from Highlands Presbytery, the GAPJC does certify that in their judgment, probable grounds exist for finding the decision of action erroneous, and that harm will occur if the decision is not stayed. Do hereby grant a stay of enforcement of those portions of the decision and order concerning the intent to or effect of restricting, inhibiting, limiting, or otherwise interfering, directly or indirectly, with the presbytery's obligation and responsibility for care and oversight in requiring a psychological exam of Reverend Ermer prior to transfer to a new call in any presbytery. In short, what the General Assembly PJC has done is returned us to the point prior to the hearing by the Synod Permanent Judicial Commission. We are back essentially to where we were last November. And so at this point, what has been required of Reverend Ermer throughout this process, the GAPJC has determined that to this point, that remains in effect. Then this morning, I received an email bright and early, and this was a communication dated September 6th, again from the GAPJC. On July 19th, Reverend Ermer challenged the dismissal of his earlier filing, the one that was said to have been a day late. The timing of this filing was questionable, leading the presbytery to object to it as being timely. This communication this morning revealed that the GAPJC did accept this filing as being timely. And so while we have waited several months to hear, that appeal is now accepted. It hasn't been acted upon, but it fulfills the requirements that I shared with you earlier. The remaining issues are set for a hearing when the GAPJC next meets, and that is October 16th through 18th. And these issues are the merits of the presbytery's appeal, Reverend Ermer's challenge to the entry of a stay, Reverend Ermer's challenge to the dismissal of the cross appeal, and if the challenge is sustained, the merits of Reverend Ermer's cross appeal. All of which is to say, when they meet in October, they are not discussing our appeal, they're discussing other things that affect that appeal. Did Reverend Ermer have the right to say the things he did in his appeal? Was it in fact timely? They haven't decided that. They've decided to hear that, and the other matters that I mentioned. There are a series of deadlines ahead of us that run through October 14th, 2 days before this GAPJC meets. I hope that I will have a report on these matters at our November meeting, but I am not guaranteeing that to be the case. Again, these are all matters separate from the Presbytery's appeal of the Synod PJC. The next time the GAPJC meets after October is not until April, and we are not guaranteed to be on that docket either, depending on the queue of events. So we could be looking at some time until this is resolved. The Synod of the Northeast has to file its record regarding our appeal of their decision by September 13th, which, if your calendar is anything like my calendar, is 3 days away from now. This latest correspondence from the General Assembly PJC will be on the website, I would say by early next week, having just received it this morning. Madam Moderator, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Stated Clerk. Are there any questions for the Stated Clerk? Thank you. So we'll move on to our first General Assembly Commissioner video. 4 commissioners from Highlands Presbytery participated in the 226th General Assembly in Salt Lake City earlier this year. A video of the town hall meeting, which was held on July the 25th, with Presbytery interaction with our commissioners, is available on our website. During today's meeting, we'll have a short video presentation from each commissioner, beginning with one from Ruling Elder Alec Jane.
So, hi, everybody. Meredith Mueller-Bolton here. I'm here on behalf of the church development team with some really great news, really exciting news that we are thrilled about. And I pass that news on to you. It's a rare thing these days and in these parts, but we have a new church development among us coming to us from Brownbrook Presbyterian Church. They are sponsoring a new church development. So Linda Owens, naturally, the pastor of that church, has been super involved in this and can give you her impressions. So I get to be the liaison from the church development team, and I get to hear about this regularly. But I'm going to turn this over to Linda so that she can fill you in about the key players and what's been going on. Linda, Linda's there in person. Hi, Linda.
Hey,
Yay.
Meredith. Thank you. My name is Linda Owens. I'm the pastor at the Brownbrook Presbyterian Church, and I have been counting down the days that I could get to this moment to share with you our good news. And to do that, I need to tee it up with a couple of sentences. In December of 2020, we got a surprise offer from Christ Presbyterian Church in Martinsville. They were doing the difficult work of dissolving themselves as a congregation, but they had investigated us unbeknownst to us and offered us their property and their assets. They are a congregation that was just 6.5 miles from the Brownbrook Church. And through a discernment process, our session graciously and with great gratitude received that glorious gift and started a 2-year discernment period of listening for the Spirit speaking about what would we do with this gift. We accepted it, agreeing that its use in whatever its future held would be for ministry and mission. So we couldn't sell the property and take care of our capital needs or, you know, solve any budgetary issues. We were charged with dreaming what God could do with this resource, this gift out of the blue. 2 years later, we were in the need of a new director of Christian education, and we found ourselves in the company of Lizette Gonzalez Sosa, then finishing up her seminary education. And she and her partners, and particularly Esther Chang, who you'll meet in a minute, came to us with a dream and a vision for what that property could be. So while we were deciding whether there would be a ministry to take this property or whether we would sell it and use it for ministry, they came with a beautiful God-inspired
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and good morning. I am delighted to be here on behalf of the Committee on Ministry. We have been very busy serving the parishes, the pastors. We have a wonderful, wonderful committee. I cannot thank them enough, and also my co-moderator, John Crozier. So we are bringing to you a recommendation. Let me read that to you. I think it's on the screen now. That the Presbytery approve the call of the Reverend Tom Brown as the pastor of the Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township. This requires a 3/4 vote of the Presbytery according to the Book of Order G-2-G-2.0504C. A little background information. The Reverend Tom Brown has served as associate pastor of the Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township for a number of years. And in February of this year, the session of the Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township requested that Reverend Tom Brown, the associate pastor, be called as the pastor of the church. COM required the session to provide a rationale for the changes, along with a description of the new position and changes to other staff positions. In the spring, the session, in consultation with COM, provided the required information, and then COM set the requirement for the following: that the Committee on Ministry, the session of PCCT, the PCC congregation, and the Presbytery of the Highlands had to approve the change, and all votes with no less than 3/4 of the present voting members, again in accordance with the Book of Order G-2.0504C. The session approved with unanimous vote on May 13th of this year. The COM approved with unanimous vote on June 4th of this year. And the congregation approved unanimously on June 23rd of this year. I can attest to that as I moderated that congregational meeting.
So the motion is before you. That the Presbytery approve the call of the Reverend Tom Brown as the pastor of the Presbyterian Church of Chatham Township. This doesn't need a second as it comes from the COM, but it does need a 3/4 vote of the Presbytery. Is there any discussion? Are we ready to vote?
Madam Moderator, it's Jean.
Yes. Jean.
What we do ask that if you are voting online, please do not remove your vote until we have counted everyone. And same in the room to raise your hand, and Steve and Liz will count you. We do have to have a count. So do not take down your hand until we tell you. Thank you.
The second thing I'm being told to remind you is that if you're a visitor, then you don't get to vote in this case. So all in favor, raise your hands, please.
Has everybody who can vote online voted?
Do we have a 2/3 vote online, Jean?
We're still voting. Hang on.
3/4, sorry, 3/4. Anybody against? That might have been a quicker, quicker way to do it. So the motion carries. Could somebody call Tom back in? No, he was just going out for the count. The motion carried unanimously. So I'd now like to turn the proceedings back to Reverend Jackie Banton.
So one of the other joys of the position of co-moderator is to introduce pastors who are doing new ministries within our Presbyterian churches, and welcoming new people to our presbytery as they begin to serve as pastors. Is Carol photo up there? Yeah. Okay. Right. So I had a call from Carol Howard, whose moving date got changed to today. So we will welcome her formally at the November meeting. But the following pastors we welcome with joy into service with us in this presbytery and as they begin their new ministries in these churches. The Reverend Eric Lay, and I will ask them to come forward if they're here so they can briefly introduce themselves and tell of one of the joys as they begin the ministry. Reverend Arlene Romaine, Community Presbyterian Church of Ringwood. Pamela Osborne, who will be the pastor ordained and installed later this month for the First Presbyterian Church of Stanhope and Andover Presbyterian Church. Reverend Jin Han, who is the interim pastor. This is a validated ministry in Westover, Connecticut, Mount Snow area for any of you who ski. And of course, our own Reverend Tex Colton, who is the interim pastor at Lower Valley Presbyterian Church in Califon. We welcome them all. And Arlene, if you're here, Eric, if you could come forward, and is Jin.
Brief. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself. I am Reverend Arlene Romaine. Was installed on Sunday at the Community Presbyterian Church in Ringwood. What a joyful occasion it was. For those of you who are a part of making that day special, I thank you for your participation in that. I am coming to you as a Reformed Church in America minister. So I am ordained in the RCA. I had been serving a church in Ridgefield, New Jersey, but I'm actually from the Oakland Butler area. So it's nice to be back in the woods where I belong. And I look forward to getting to know all of you more. Thank you.
My name is Eric Lai. I'm born in Taiwan, and a lot of missionaries came to the island and inspired and encouraged me. And I've been serving Reformed Church in Queens and Long Island for over 30-some years. And I'm glad I have opportunity to continue to serve in Hillsborough Hillsborough Church. And I believe it's most southern part of our church. So I'm glad to have this opportunity. And please help me to get into this big family. Thank you.
Yes, Jin. Jin is here. My name is Jin Han. I'm glad to be here this morning. I have been a member of the Presbytery actually since the days of the Presbytery of Newton. And after I retired from teaching at New York Theological Seminary, I moved to Vermont. And when I was leaving Vermont, I had to leave my church, Stockton Presbyterian Church, in the current presbytery, the Presbytery Highlands. And as I was leaving, I shared something to the effect that it doesn't, the Presbyterian Church doesn't, there are not many Presbyterian churches. Actually, there's no Presbyterian church where I'm moving to. So here I'll be looking for a church, but I do not know how it will go. And one of the members of the church said to me, Pastor, you don't have to look for a church. Church will find you. And indeed, that's what happened. So here I have been asked to serve as an interim pastor in West Dover, yes, actually in Vermont, the Mount Snow ski area. So, and I'm glad to be able to be engaged in this ministry in the connectional system. And I remain there as a member of the presbytery. So here, this will be validated ministry. And here, after this introduction, I have to go to the Vermont conference meeting of the United Church of Christ so that they can also certify my work, my ministry at West Dover. And they call it dual standing. So I say here we call validated ministry. And there they call it dual standing. And Steve, the state clerk, graciously helped me to understand. They were talking about the same thing with the two different names. So I bring greetings to my home presbytery Highlands. And so thanks be to God for giving me this opportunity to continue to be engaged in the ministry of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much.
And lastly, I get to introduce
There are no questions? That's a lot of stuff to digest.
So in that case, thank you so much to Gina and to Jackie and particularly Jean for all the hard work on behalf of the Assembly on this. And for those of you certainly in the room, there'll be a test shortly on the details. So now you're invited to share announcements with the Presbytery through the chat function. You can type a question in now or paste in something that you've already written. After lunch, Chad will point out the posted items so that even if you haven't been scrolling through the chat, you'll hear of things that you may be interested in following up on later. If you would like to have your announcements added to the Presbytery minutes, you need to email them to Liz Hutchinson, whose email address is on the slide, so that she can add them to the minutes. Yes.
We are, by the grace of God, ahead of schedule. And so thanks to the Assembly for that. I don't believe lunch is even ready for us at this moment. And so we could begin whatever items are next. I believe it's a commissioner video, and then move on until about noon.
So I was going to call on the vice moderator, Reverend Chad Rogers, to offer a blessing for lunch, but as lunch isn't ready, I will just hand over the gavel to him.
All right, well, I believe I'm supposed to scroll through the announcements that are just supposed to be pouring in. So let me just pull up the chat feature. They're not pouring in as far as I can tell. So I'm gonna suggest that at some point towards the lunch break, all those announcements that have poured into the chat, I will read off in dramatic fashion. In the meantime, we will go ahead and have our nerd. I love that about him. I love that about him. I love that about him. It's time for the administration and coordinating team report, and they have a couple motions as well. And so at this time, I invite Pete Peterson to come join us.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be moving along at a good rate today, and we might even be able to end the day on the early side. That would be wonderful. As the co-moderator of the ACT, I have the honor of presenting several, well, not me presenting several items, but overseeing the presentation that the ACT has today of several items for your attention. The first one I will be presenting, and that is the 2025 proposed budget. The ACT has several two action items for the Presbytery action during this meeting, as well as a couple of other presentations. You've already acted on the first action item, and that is approving the per capita assessment for 2025. The next item is as a result of the the Book of Order requiring presbyteries to adopt several policies, not just the presbytery, but all councils to adopt several policies. One of the policies that we are ready to present to the presbytery is an anti-harassment policy. And to speak to that, I'm asking my colleague Stephanie Monsell to come up and make that presentation.
Good afternoon. I want to acknowledge that my cohort, David Harvey, is still here. So this is I'm coming to you as a member of the Personnel Subcommittee of ACT. We were assigned the task of looking at the anti-harassment policy. It was included in your material. a few things to note. This will eventually also be required for our sessions. So we were mindful in creating this as a potential, and it is a template for us to pass along to our congregations so that this will be helpful when you come to this task, because it will be required for all our sessions as well to have an anti-harassment policy. Just a few things I wanted to highlight. The fact that this is a policy to help create a good working environment for all our councils, for all the work that we do together, and that our responding procedures are really based in grace. If you noted, when we looked at the responding policies, it is lifted up that we want to err on the side of grace. This is not a policy that is meant to make our lives more difficult, but to enrich our lives as we work together. So this comes to you from the ACT, and we move it to all of your good wisdom.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. You do have a motion. The motion is that the Presbytery approve the anti-harassment policy for Presbytery of the Highlands. It doesn't need a second. It comes from ACT. Are there any questions regarding the anti-harassment policy? Yes, I see one if you had stepped to the mic.
My name's Mel Prestamo. I'm a voting member. In reading this, I am looking at the introduction portion. I have two amendments that I would like to offer. In sentence number 3 in that paragraph, you seem to list every conceivable job or person that would be affected by this policy. I'm caught by the omission of your average church member, which could also be impacted by any negative action taken by any member of a presbytery. So my motion is that in sentence number 3, where the comma exists, or ministry partners, or be deleted, comma after ministry partners, or its church members to be added. Because that omission just jumps out at me. You've listed everybody else except. And in the attempt to list everybody, I think the omission needs to be corrected. And then that was my first comment. And the second comment is on page 3 in the prevention practices, sentence number 2. Again, the omission in encouraging officers in the presbytery to take these training courses, ruling elders at the church level are omitted. Now, while you may not want to require that they participate, you might want to encourage that they participate. And this comes out of my background on PJC, where we have dealt with churches where the elders have taken actions that were inappropriate, but unaware that they were inappropriate. So I think that elders at the local level should at least be encouraged to take those boundary training courses. So those are my two requests for amendments.
The specifics of that second amendment was to encourage elders. Is that, what is the language that's being added
All
there?
right, so minister members, commissioners, committee commissioner members, presbytery employees, and other categories of presbytery leaders are expected to complete an initial training event and participate, et cetera, et cetera. And I would simply suggest that at the end, that ruling elders are encouraged to participate.
So almost a separate sentence there.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mel has proposed 2 amendments, and do we need somebody to second that motion? Okay, or that amendment to the motion? Great. I do see a second, and so at this point, yes.
One at a time.
Do we have to take them one at a time? That was actually my other question. Okay, well, let's go with the first one that Mel has suggested, that we add church member to that sentence there. as he very clearly described to us. I assume that second is for that amendment as well. So we'll go forward. Stephanie, I don't know if you want to speak to that. Yeah.
I think when I remember our conversations, when those things that we listed, it was our understanding that if you were participating in a presbytery space, that the commissioner and committee member language covered some of those. Does that sound right, David? So it wasn't an attempt to omit anything, but we just thought those categories would cover if anybody was here, if anybody was in a presbytery gathering. So that's some background I'll give, whether or not, just FYI.
Are there anyone else would like to speak to the amendment to the motion to approve the policy? Yeah, Nancy.
I'm Nancy Young, retired yet working. This is a great template for sessions to look at for this policy. And I really appreciate all the work that went into it. It seems to me that congregation members, ruling elders, whether they're sitting on session or not, would be covered when a session adopts their own version of this policy. So it doesn't need to be a presbytery policy. Just thinking.
Yes, please.
That's why it's helpful to look at those two motions separately. So in terms of this, what we're voting on is for our presbytery times together. There will be, you will be asked to adopt this for your congregations. And so elders functioning in your church would be covered by your congregational policy. This policy is for, yes, and I'll let you.
No, that's all right. I wasn't trying to creepily lean over your shoulder either. I see there's a hand raised online and we'll get to that. But David, why don't, since you were part of the team, if you could also speak to that, it'd be great.
David Harvey, Blairstown. The intention was to create a policy that the presbytery would approve and hopefully would be helpful for sessions, not having to write their own, but just to use this as a template as you set out to carry on this work that is before us. So hopefully you can just take out presbytery and add your session and your congregation's name to that. That's what the intention is.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Vice Moderator, it's Jean.
Yes.
There is online right now a template for the anti-harassment policy for sessions and congregations. We have uploaded that template. There'll be a link to that in the Presbytery highlights and in the newsletter coming this Friday.
Thanks, Jean. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the amendment to the motion? Yes. I don't know how to begin. There was a hand raised. Maybe it went down. Maybe it got answered. Okay. If you want to raise your hand online, be quick about it. Okay. Thanks, Liz. Okay. Yes. What, Mel, if you'd like to speak one more time, that'd be great.
My intent of the amendment is not to include church members as actors under this policy. It is to protect church members of the actions of all those officials that act on behalf of Presbytery. So it would read, in sense, Presbytery will not tolerate any act of aggression against a church member. That's my intent, because all those actors have impact at the church level. So the sense of it is that they need to be protected from the actors. That's the intent of my.
Great. Thank you, Mel. I think we'll go ahead and call for the question, seeing no other hands raised for comments. Can we just read back that little piece of the motion again? The amendment to the harassment policy?
We
If
actually,
we wrote it down,
we will have to ask the maker of the motion to do that because
you want to?
we do not have it in writing.
Oh,
If it's-
okay,
If
great.
it's passed, subsequent one, we will need to have.
I just want to be very clear what we're voting on before we vote.
I did. Sentence number
Great, I'd love to have it. Yeah. Okay. So sentence number 3, adds, takes or out in front of ministry partners and adds or its church members. That is the amendment to the policy that you've had before you, if you're looking at it. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed to the motion?
Chad, please let the, those online have a chance to vote. It takes a little bit longer.
A little bit longer. I apologize. Also, I think it's so close anyway. We're going to have to count. So if everyone could clear their raised hands online, and I will give you a chance to revote, that would be great.
All right, I'm clearing the online and I'm going to ask everybody online to revote. Use the green check mark or the
Green
red
check mark.
X.
I see hands raising already online, so get rid of those things.
No, this is the redo.
Okay, I'll call for the question again in just a moment. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to add or church members, or the amendment to the motion, I apologize. Please vote now if you are in favor of the amendment with either a green check mark or a raised hand. And if you could leave them up so we could count while we're in here, that would be great. Thank you. We're good? Okay, if you're in this room, you can put your hand down. That's great. Thank you. Who's counting online?
I got it. It's 28 and 4 and 4 against.
Oh, all right. We haven't had our against yet. You guys are very quick in there.
Well, you
okay.
can use one
do
or
it
the
all at
other.
once. Yes, I
Yeah.
understand. And for this room, all those opposed to the amendment, please raise your hand.
Chad?
Okay. After tallying the vote, the ayes have it. So
Chad, there are some
Yes.
people online who said they didn't get a chance to vote in the negative.
Okay.
So those, could you ask for those who are against it online only to
Sure, I
click
take back everything I just said. And if you are online and you did not have a chance to vote in the negative, please do so now.
So it'll be 28 and 7 for the online.
Okay, so my previous comment still stands. The amendment carries, and so that will be part of the motion now. And now there was another amendment to this motion. I realize everyone's getting hungry. Don't get antsy just yet. We will eat lunch, but we're going to at least finish this piece of business that is before us before we make our pause. So Mel, does he also have the second amendment there? I have it in front of me. Okay, great. Thanks, Liz. Okay, so on page 3, it is the first paragraph there on prevention practices, and it would add, wait, where is that? Is that in the first sentence there? Yes. It's a new sentence at the end of the second, it's really the end of the paragraph, right? Yeah, so the end of that first paragraph would add, ruling elders would be encouraged to participate in this training. So that is the amendment that we have before you. Are there questions or discussion regarding that amendment? Yes.
Woodward, I suggest that you say ruling elders are encouraged, not would be.
Thank you. Is that amenable to you, Mel? Because it wasn't actually written on your piece of paper here. Okay, so ruling elders are encouraged is the language that we have before us. Any other questions or discussion? Anything online that I'm not seeing? There is a hand raised. Jamie Evans. Sure, come on up, Brian, and we're just gonna see if we can get this hand first. Okay, go ahead, Jamie.
I just have a question. If that training is part of the boundary training, does that mean that elders are encouraged to attend full boundary training?
Mr. Moderator,
Yeah.
there is, as I will be explaining after lunch, that is already mandated by the Book of Order regarding boundary training. Anti-harassment training, we would have to explore whether that's available to us on the mass scale.
Does that answer your question, Jamie?
Yes, it does. I thank you very much. I was not aware that elders were supposed to be part of boundary training, so thank you.
Yeah, and like Steve said, after lunch, that's actually the part of this report we haven't gotten to. But Ryan, go ahead and.
Pastor of Presbyterian Church of Rockaway, the question was to the same regard, whether it was redundant or not, because I know a lot of boundary trainings include anti-harassment in their training. So that was my only question. Isn't it redundant? That was the only thought.
Okay, great. And go ahead, Mel.
In light of that redundancy, I would withdraw my amendment.
Okay. Amendment withdrawn, which I believe brings us back, if I'm doing these things correctly, to our already amended motion, which the amendment of which we already approved. So now my question is, are there any further questions or discussion around the amendment to adopt the anti-harassment policy as now been amended? Only for you, Chris, only for you. If anyone else had asked, the answer would have been no. Yes, it's in the introduction section. The Presbytery will not tolerate any type of harassment of its employees, minister members, ruling elders, volunteers, or has been struck, and ministry partners. Then we add the Oxford comma and or the church members. Period. All right, seeing no further questions or discussion, I will ask only those who would vote affirmative, both online and go ahead and use the green check mark online, and in this room, please raise your hand. Okay, if you are in here, you can put your hands down. Thank you. Now, if there are any who oppose, please use the red X if you are online, or vote with a raised hand in this room. I believe I've seen enough to see that the motion carries. And so we have now adopted the policy, amended policy that was presented to us. I know that there is a little bit more. Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, David. Thank you to the work of the personnel team. Now, at this point, I would suggest that we return to the rest of the ACT's report following our lunch break. And I would entertain a motion to, I don't know, do we need a motion? We just get to break for lunch, part of our docket, right? Yeah. Well, then I'm just going to say a prayer. So don't run for lunch until I offer a blessing.
Mr. Moderator, if you could remind everyone, 30 minutes is 1:45.
Oh,
We will
30
proceed.
minutes is 1:45. Okay, all right. Even though we're way ahead, they're being really strict about that lunch period. All right. It's out of my hands, folks. Half hours on the docket. Let us pray. Gracious God, we offer our thanksgiving for the work that this presbytery does as a body, for the time in which we share in community, both online and in this space. Thank you for the beauty of your creation as we see it and enjoy it here at Camp Johnsonburg. And bless this meal, bless the time that we share, and we thank you for those who have worked with this bounty of your earth to provide it for us today. And we pray all these things in the name of the risen Lord Christ. Amen. I would just recommend you go out and enjoy our new deck, as it has